Have you ever looked around at your life, maybe while folding laundry or lying in bed, and just felt that deep ache or grief for the life that you thought you'd be living? Maybe you thought you'd have kids by now, or you'd be traveling, or you'd feel more at home in your body. You'd be healthy, you'd be happy. Maybe you imagined a version of you who had more energy and more peace, more financial stability. And the gap between her and you feels excruciating. So sometimes we end up carrying all of this grief without realizing it. And it's not because someone passed away, nothing dramatic happened. It just didn't go the way that we planned. And now we're living a life that maybe we didn't choose, but we're doing our best to make peace with it. So today we're going to talk about that kind of grief, the grief of the life that you didn't get to live. And that's real and it's valid. And naming it is one of the most compassionate things that you can do for yourself. So let's talk about why this hurts so much and what we can do with the ache. We don't have language for this kind of loss. It's not the kind of loss of a person or a pet or even a place like a home. It is the loss of possibility. There's actually a term for this called ambiguous grief. And it's what we feel when something we hoped for or something that we imagined slowly slips out of reach. There's no clean break. There's no clear ending. Just 1,000 tiny moments of this isn't what I pictured. And if you've ever tried to explain that kind of sadness, you've probably been met with, well, at least you're alive, or it could be worse, or be grateful for what you have. And those things might be true, but they don't erase the loss. You might be grieving a timeline you built your entire identity around. You thought you'd be married by 30, or maybe you'd have a baby by now. Or you'd still be working in the career that you gave your 20s to before chronic illness or burnout changed the plan. Or maybe you thought healing would be faster. Maybe it'd be smoother, it'd be easier. You imagined a version of yourself that could wake up energized, that could move throughout the day without spiraling or dealing with fatigue or anxiety, who felt safe in her skin, and that version feels out of reach. That's the grief of what could have been. And it's hard because there's no one to blame, right? No obituary to point to. Just a version of you that never got to fully arrive. And grieving this kind of loss doesn't look like what people expect. There's no dramatic breakdown, no neat 5 stages. It's a lot quieter and messier, and it comes in waves, sometimes without warning. One moment you're totally fine, and then the next you're crying in the car after seeing a pregnancy announcement. Maybe you're staring blankly at your computer wondering how this became your life, and you deal with so much frustration. A client of mine spent so many years training to be a dancer, and it was her identity. She did this for decades. And then chronic illness hit, and her body just couldn't keep up. And she didn't know how to grieve it because, like she said, I'm still here. Nothing terrible happened, but something did. Right? The version of her who danced for 6 hours a day for decades didn't make it. And once she gave herself permission to grieve that version without minimizing it, she found space to meet herself where she was. And that's the core of this, right? You're not just mourning a plan, you are mourning yourself, an identity, a rhythm that you fell into. And maybe you felt it too, right? That weird jealousy when someone hits a milestone that you were supposed to hit. Or the way that you avoid certain dreams because they still sting. Maybe crying while packing away baby clothes that you never got to use. Or feeling exhausted, bitter, and numb, wondering why you can't just move on. But grief doesn't respond to logic. It responds to love. So if you're in the middle of this kind of grief, if you are still unpacking a version of yourself that didn't get to finish her story, please know that this is not weakness. It is evidence that something mattered to you. And grieving doesn't mean that you've given up. It means you're finally telling the truth. So I want to be clear. You do not have to love where you are right now in order to start making peace. That peace doesn't necessarily mean approval. It doesn't mean pretending that this was the plan all along either. What it means is that you stop fighting what already happened, because you can't change the past, right? You stop arguing with reality. You loosen the grip on what should have been, and you give your nervous system some space to breathe. So how do you do that without spiraling, bypassing, or forcing this toxic positivity? Try ritualizing the loss. So sometimes our body just needs a marker, right? A way to say, hey, this is ended. Hey, this is where we need to go from here. Even if it didn't end the way that you wanted it to, or the way that you thought it would. Try writing a goodbye letter to the version of you who didn't get to finish her dream. Be honest, be messy, be kind to yourself, and then do something with it. Burn it, bury it. You can toss it in the river, read it out loud, shred it. It doesn't have to be fancy. It's just something that is meant for you, that is symbolic of you marking that endpoint and releasing it. Something else you can do is make room for both. Grief and gratitude can live in the same space. So you can miss the life that you thought you'd have and still be deeply proud of the one that you're building now, right? Still being proud and thankful and grateful for how much progress you've made. You know, we are so often told that we have to choose. There's one extreme or the other. We have to choose between sadness and celebration, between longing and presence. But you really don't. You can be in love with the life that you're creating and still ache and yearn for the one that didn't happen. That's just duality, and it's a part of being human. Something else is that it is okay to let that new dream be smaller. So maybe your new life doesn't look like a vision board. It's not loud, it's not fancy, it's slower, it's quieter, it's more intimate. But that doesn't mean it's less important, right? After trauma and illness and burnout, that success might look like getting dressed today. It might look like going for a 10-minute walk or a 30-minute walk. Maybe it is finally answering a text message after 3 weeks of feeling extremely overwhelmed. You know, these aren't small things. I can remember in the very beginning of my recovery journey when I could barely walk. I mean, I was bedridden and I was just getting to a point where I could make it to the bathroom and make it to the kitchen or even make it to get a glass of water. Like, that is success, right? That was success for me in that moment. So your dream might not be really loud. It might not have all the bells and whistles, but it can still be meaningful. So let that be enough. Again, you are absolutely allowed to grieve the life that you thought you'd be living by now. That timeline, that version of your life, the version of your body, whatever dream you had that didn't fully land, even if no one else saw it fall apart, you did, and that's enough. Your grief matters, and that kind of grief isn't a sign of failure. It's a sign that you care deeply, that you hoped, that you were excited, that you were brave, that you sacrificed, that you imagined something beautiful. And while you might not be living that version of your life, you're still here, and you're still blooming, and you're still becoming. So let that be enough for now. And if this episode gave a voice to something that you've been carrying, I would love to invite you into the Garden, which is our free community space for women who are healing in real time. And it is a space where you don't have to explain why you're still grieving. We can talk about grief, we talk about nervous system healing and regulation, we talk about rebuilding your identity, the mind-body connection, how the spirit can integrate as well, and what it means to start over in life when it didn't go the way you planned, especially in regards to an overwhelmed, overstimulated nervous system, whether that is from trauma, whether that is from a busy life, or a chronic illness that got in the way. We also have free workshops, somatic practices, and little prompts for you throughout the week that help you move forward without rushing the process. So you don't have to do this alone, and you deserve to be supported. We'd love to be here for you.